Lovely, nice to meet you. And welcome to Scubaverse.
Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
for the invitation.
Well, the Avelo Dive System, it's something that I've been hearing about the last couple of weeks. Um, I don't think we have it here in the UK yet, but it sounds pretty amazing. It sounds like you can get rid of your weights, your weight belt, your BCD, and free up diving enormously. Can you tell us more about it?
Yes, yes, we are, especially for the UK. It will come to the UK. It will be there in, we believe, by the end of the year or early next. We are sorry for you guys that you have to still carry very heavy gear. But that's, to be fair, the weight of the gear is the first thing that you hear about. The beauty of the system comes from the ability to change how you think about scuba and enjoy a much more relaxed dive, regardless of your level of experience in scuba. The developers of the system come from many years of teaching scuba, and we're all very experienced, and yet we're not going back to standard scuba. So the weight is one component of this. Uh, to start with, the concept of Avelo was born from the idea that if we'll keep using what you use today, which is a tank that you have to, like a standard scuba tank is heavy to begin with, right? That's what you guys are carried to your cold, cold environment. Um, and on top of this, on top of its own weight, you have to start the dive with that tank negatively buoyant because there's mass of air in the tank or whatever breathing gas you use. That mass is going to be consumed throughout the dive. And if you don't carry extra weight, end of the dive, you're going to float. That's just simple physics. So the scuba industry evolved around the concept that no matter what you do, scuba must be heavy, even if you weigh yourself absolutely perfect and you have dove for 30 years and you know exactly how much weight you need with each wetsuit and all that, you must start the dive negatively buoyant. So you carry a heavy tank, you carry weight, then you jump in the water, you're too heavy, you have a BCD, you inflate it, and that counterbalance the weight. That's the concept. Any type of system, side mount, CCR, you name it, everything works on the same concept. Avelo took a different approach. You actually can start with very lightweight tanks. The tank has its own displacement. It can float you. The problem is you need to offset the weight of the gas of the mass inside the tank. So this is an Avelo hydro tank. Simply put, it's a carbon fiber shell that is very lightweight and will float you. There's a bladder inside. Just like any other scuba tank, there's a valve. You fill it like you fill any other scuba tank with air or gas. The bladder will inflate internally. It will go all the way to the bottom here. It contains the gas, 200 bar. It can go to 300 bar, but we leave this for as a separate topic. Usually we fill it to 200 bar. Now you have a lightweight device that floats you, and instead of carrying weights or very heavy weights, you pump water in as much as you need. It's a very different game than standard scuba because you don't have very large compressible volume that you need to contend with. Here, 1 liter of water, that's the first fill. It puts your head below water. From then on, you're neutral. There's no changes. You point down, you swim, you go to wherever you want. It's a much smoother diving experience because there's no compressible volume. In a nutshell, that's what the Avelo system is.
So sorry. So you're saying once you've got that whether it be salt water or fresh water or whatever, as soon as you've got that buoyancy right at the surface, and I'm guessing no matter what type of suit you're wearing, whether it be dry suit or just a t-shirt, your buoyancy is then taken care of for the entire dive.
By your lungs. This is a much different play with the ability to control the buoyancy at that point becomes far easier by just using normal breathing. And you're right, it doesn't matter what wetsuit you're carrying or a dry suit. Because the compressible volume is not there, you're not dealing with any sort of a balloon on you. Now, a dry suit is a different story. We're going to put the dry suit aside for a second and we'll come back to it. But especially on wetsuits, there is no balloon. Wetsuit compression is a bit of a myth. It's something that was rooted in the scuba industry for many years, many years, and belongs in about 1980s, where chloroprene and other neoprene compounds were changed. And with the advent of a wetsuit compression became almost a non-topic, including very heavy wetsuits, 8 millimeters and 10. We researched it to death. The compression of a wetsuit really doesn't change your buoyancy in any appreciable way. And so the system itself doesn't do anything automatic. From the moment that you put your head below water, the difference between this and a traditional BCD is that when you pump the bladder and you put your head below water, you are neutral. There's no force that sinks you. If you want to get down, you swim, but it's a lot closer to free diving in that regard. You swim down and there's no compression. Or obviously wetsuit compress. They just don't compress to the extent that you think about it from, years of diving. The belief that the wetsuit is what makes the buoyancy change, it's a myth. Again, proven with hundreds of wetsuits and experiments and very precise measurements. The reality is that once you have a tank on your back and you're neutral, you can swim from the surface to 30 meters with a 7 millimeter wetsuit. You take a breath and you're neutral again. And we do that. That's actually our training. In the training, one of the first skills that we do is exactly that. We don't go all the way down to 30 meters. We go to 18, and we actually have you swim back up to 5 meters and back down to 18. And you see that the instructor will be like, stop, wherever you want. Again, the system doesn't do anything automatic. It actually doesn't do anything. You just stop and you hover. And whether you have 2 dives to your name or 3,000, both of you are going to look at each other. Many instructors don't like that because it kind of takes away the teaching and the training. But honestly, the teaching and the training is there to make you safer. The system just makes you safer because it takes away the destabilizing factor called the compressible volume. Dry suits. You asked about dry suits. We dive dry suits commonly. Obviously, you have to manage the dry suit itself. And we're talking like people that know how to manage a dry suit, not a. You don't just throw a dry suit on a person and expect them to learn how to dive a dry suit. The dry suit needs to be um, learned or experienced, and it's something that you need to know. But once you know how to manage a dry suit, Avelo just makes the whole experience a lot better, and that's evident by the people that dive it with a dry suit all the time. First of all, it cuts down tremendous amount of weight. Tremendous. We're talking at least 25, 30 pounds of weight difference between the two systems. You take a traditional on a dry suit, even if you are super experienced, you've been diving dry suits your whole life, you know exactly how to weigh yourself, 30 pounds. Difference. That's the one difference. The second difference is the smoothness of the experience because you're managing the dry suit alone, not a dry suit and a BCD. And that's a consequence of how much weight and how much air you need to keep in either system.
Sounds fantastic. Tell me, how do you actually pump in the air? How do you actually control it all?
So I'll show you. So let's just before I go there, let's talk about the physics of this. Once you pump air, you asked about the air, so I'm answering the air question. This is a 3D model showing it. There's a system behind me that's the real thing. The filling is a DIN valve. It's a regular standard DIN valve. Every compressor in the world that is equipped with a DIN valve or you have a DIN adapter can fill it. When you fill it to pressure, the bladder expands. Now, when you think about it from a thermodynamics perspective, this gas is now, we're talking 200 bar. The bladder is almost a solid at that point. Now, the rubber itself feels the pressure from both sides. It's pressed against the aluminum from the outside, and the air is the expanding media. That's what creating the pressure. In order to push water in, you have to overcome that pressure. So there is a pump that will pump water in. In order to let the water out, this is a passive thing. You open a little purge valve, the bladder will always want to expand because it's always pressurized. So the bladder will push the water out. So you only need power to put water in. But again, it's a very different thinking than BCD. With BCDs, you are constantly thinking about what will happen and you pump air in or you allow air out and reposition, and you have dump valves and all that. Here you don't mess with it at all. There's, like you can see how this is the jetpack. There's a pump. This is the pump. Those are the inlets. You have, when you want to put that liter of water in, and to the audience, a liter of water is about, 2.2 pounds um, of mass change, which means if you do it in kilograms, that just means that you're a kilogram heavy, and that's all you need. When you want to pump water in, there's a battery on this side. There's a simple on-off button. It's a piezo right there. You press it once, the pump will engage. It pumps water from the ocean. It will imagine the tank here. It puts water in the tank. It stops after a minute because it's arbitrary. We just wanted the pump to stop so it won't continue forever. It's calibrated to do 1 liter. You can always stop it in between. In this regard, it's exactly like a BCD. You do it by feel. You feel how much water you need in the tank, or you just let the run finish its 1 minute cycle. And again, the pump doesn't know how much water you need. Only you know how much water you need. You do one cycle, your head goes below water. That's it. From that point, you dive, dive, dive. 20, 30, 40 minutes later, you'll even remember that there's something on your back. And then, unlike a BCD, because there's no dramatic buoyancy changes, it's very, very, very slight. And in fact, like old school, you could complete a full dive. If you know what you're doing, you can complete a full dive without the system. What you'll find though is that you're working too hard to do that. When you become slightly buoyant, you run the pump again, you put another liter in the tank. The trick is if you breathe through a kilogram of air, you pump a liter of water in. Your lungs has something called the tidal volume. Many divers know it. If your tidal volume is about 500 milliliters, that's the exchange rate of every breath that you take. As long as the forces that operate you underwater are within that 500, 600 milliliter, you will not even feel a difference. You can go up in the water column indefinitely. You won't know that there's a difference. You're neutral no matter what you do. After 30 minutes, when you breathe through, again, let's say you breathe through 700 milliliter, 700 grams of gas, you're slightly buoyant. You can compensate with your lungs. You'll pay for it with air consumption, but it's still very comfortable. Or you pump a liter in and it reduces your air consumption because you go back to the sweet spot for another 30, 40 minutes. End of the dive comes, you reach the surface, you open this purge valve, you let all the water out of the tank, it will expand, you come out of the water, and you go have a beer.
It's,
It really is a simple concept.
sounds
But
perfect dive.
yeah, but now,
But
now that you understand it, a lot of the questions that we keep getting are like, oh, but what if the battery dies? Nonsense. The battery affect the quality of your dive. It will be nicer, but the battery can die 20 times. There's no consequence to your safety because your buoyancy doesn't change.
tell me about the training. So I assume one just can't go into a shop and buy a unit and jump in the sea with it.
Correct. Correct. The training reviews the mindset shift in this. We're a training um, organization. Avelo is a training organization that builds the product as well. And that product is being licensed with the first one that is going to make another jetpack for us is Shearwater, but we're primarily a training organization. The training at the basic level, you have to be an existing diver for now. That's going to change by the end of the year. But for now, you have to be an existing diver. And there's an e-learning that takes about 2 hours. The e-learning has 3 chapters that are mandatory and one that is not. The first three, one of them deals with how to think about diving when your mind needs to bend around the fact that you don't think about balloons and weights anymore. You think about mass reduction throughout the dive. And what does it do for how much weight you can save compared with the standard gear? How to deal with it on the surface, how to think about mass and all that. The second chapter covers the technical part, the pump, the battery, how to fly with things, how to travel with them, and all that. Section 3 explains the fundamentals, how to track your air with the pressure that goes up, how to perfectly balance yourself in case you needed extra weight, how much weight to take, how to dive it, how to free dive with the device. This is closer to free diving, so how to free dive with the system, and so on. Section 4 going a lot more technical. It explains physiology changes, why your air consumption gets better on this, why the relaxation level is much higher. And it goes into something called the Avelo mode, which is a piece of software that tracks your buoyancy throughout the dive and shows you, it compares it to your current air consumption rate. It shows you how you respond to little things in the dive, like everything from seeing an unexpected life to doing skills. And it compares your buoyancy level relative to perfect to how much air consumption you're wasting. Um, and it explained the background to how do we get to those calculations and what do you do. So section 4 is more robust. So, but it takes about 2 hours to go through all of the e-learning if you just do the three sections. Or the fourth section is really for professionals and geeks like me. And then you have the water part. There's 2 dives. The first dive is designed to really kind of separate in your head the idea that depth change and buoyancy changes must be combined. You learn how to put the gear together. You do skills that are related to buoyancy, and the more experienced you are, the more new this feels because you learn to dump that anticipation and always be like, I'm going up, I need to exhale and I need to dump. They're looking for devices on you that goes away. Dive 2, you're doing all the skills. You will experience a pump running without stopping intentionally, and you'll experience what it's like to have a catastrophic fail where all the water in the tank leaves. We make you dump all the water in the tank towards the end of the dive to show you that even that is not an emergency, not even close. And you do out of air, you do all the skills that will mimic some sort of malfunctions throughout the dive. And we do that so you can see that if that ever happened to you in a BCD, those are the nightmares of a BCD. If the BCD gets sliced and you suddenly lose all the air and you're heavy, you're at depth, that's a thing to contend with. The equivalent here is a change in buoyancy of like, a kilogram at most. So, but you need to feel it, like you need to actually do it and then you feel it. The other skill is the opposite. If you have a BCD that inflates on you or you lost a weight belt, you're truly at a risk of getting to the surface unless you can grab something. With a velo, when we do the same skill, the worst that can happen is that's going to be light by about a kilogram and a half. A BCD can develop 15 kilograms of force. A kilogram and a half is almost imperceptible. You do the skill, you open the purge, and you can see that you barely float. And then the other skills are just to see It's a lot easier to bail another person. You can do you can share air with an octo and go back to the surface. So there's a few more scales that we show, how to deal with, and really just teach you how to dive this system compared with standard scuba.
So, as with normal dive bottles, we in the UK here have to have them pressure tested regularly. I think it's every 3 years. Um, what happens with your system?
So we follow the local regulations. The system was certified specifically, excuse me, it was developed over 5 years. The pressure vessel itself, the scuba tank, the scuba tank. In our world, the scuba tank is called a pressure vessel. And for regulatory perspective, it has an ISO specific standard, and then on top of it, there's an underwater application. The For the very savvy listeners, the ISO that it follows is ISO 9111-2, accepted worldwide. It has a very specific regulation, and it follows, in this case, exactly the local regulation. So every year you do a visual inspection, which is just by eye, and an Avelo technician can do that. We train in every shop, in every dive business that we are, there will be an Avelo technician. It's part of the agreement. That Avelo technician is usually the shop technician, and they can inspect the vessel every year. And then in the US, it's 5 years. If in the UK, it's every three, whatever the time period that the local regulator requires, you do the hydrostatic pressure. Uh, Again, it's exactly the same procedure of hydrostatically testing the pressure vessel, call the cylinder today, remove the valve, you put an adapter, you put a label. The difference is on an aluminum tank, you stamp it, and on this type of tank, you put a sticker and you cover it with a epoxy. Not new. This is not new. Any one of those hydrostatic testing that is doing pressure vessels for firefighters, special units, CO2, paintball, those are all falling under the same regulatory environment.
Understood. Great. Oh, well, that's very easy. The other thing that comes to mind is the emergency scenario where you're down, I don't know, 30 meters or something. Um, and against all things that you wish, you have to get to the surface quite quickly for whatever emergency it is. How does the system cope with things like that?
Because emergencies are something that belongs in the world of standard scuba a lot more than in the world of Avelo. And the reason for that is that when you have an emergency, look at what you just did in your head. I'm like, well, that depends. I need to figure out I have out of air. If I'm going too fast, I need a decompression. I need to take into account decompression. But if I'm running out of air, I need to dump air. You already, both in your mind and in your body language, conveyed what it is to run into an emergency with standard scuba. Now imagine a world that those consequences just don't exist. You're at 30 meters and you need to get to the surface. Don't worry about fast ascent because it can't happen, or too fast of an ascent. And don't worry about being too heavy because it cannot happen on the system. It's physically impossible. What happens is if you need to share air, you share air. On your own. Let's go to the scenario that you're with a body. You just surprise them that you have a thing. Now both of you are in some sort of oh, we need to get out of here. You both need to manage an airbag. Whether you want to or not, you have to manage an airbag on the ascent. And now you have a lot of options. You can drop the weights if it's really the doomsday, or you need to contend with an inflation. And the two of you need to do that. On a velo, you go to your buddy, you sign up, the two of you swim up. If you needed to stop for a safety stop because again, emergencies mean a lot of things. So if you can do the safety stop on a Velo, you'll do a safety stop no matter what. There's no consequence that will shoot you out or will drown you. You propel yourself to wherever you need to be. It's much, much easier to do than on standard scuba. And your task load is a lot lower. And that's something that we teach. There's nothing really to teach. We let you experience it.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah.
That was the last two questions I wanted to ask you.
And all of these must be compared with diving a BCD. The problems with BCDs are either development of force to the surface or lack of force, and then you have a stink. And those caused the accident in the past in either direction. So when you compare it, one is a BCD inflating and you can't stop it, stuck. The power inflator is stuck for whatever reason. If it's stuck fast, maybe you'll be able to catch it because it's dramatic, so you'll be able to get it out. But in reality, unless you're practiced, the response time of disconnecting a hose is not there. Absolutely, training can take care of it, no doubt. But nobody does, or very, very few people take the time to disconnect it. By the time that you need to respond to it, you need to remember that you push the hose in, you slide the ring out, and then it will pop out. This is a training thing. That said, once it happens, and especially if it gets stuck and it's a low inflation, before you know it, because you can't hear it, it's not dramatic. Before you know it, the force that develops is high. The reason from physics again, when you have a sphere, imagine the air in the BC as a sphere. When a sphere expands, even 1 centimeter in diameter of expansion is the buoyancy force that comes out of this is related to the radius increase to the power of 3. The power is so fast evolving that before you catch what happens, you are already ascending at a rate that what will alert you will be the burp of you know, of the dump valve. With us, again, we practice it on the second dive of the rad. We wait to the second third of the dive, to the end of the dive. So you're going to be as light as you're going to be. And the instructor will go to you and say, now you purge all the water out of the tank, which is equivalent in the scenario. And you'll see your eyes when you'll be underwater. You'll be like, oh my God, I'm going to fly to the surface. You're like, oh, that's actually fine. I can like stay down here and swim maybe a little bit head down, even if that. But this is actually very manageable. And it doesn't matter what your level of skill is. The other scenario is the pump. Everybody's concerned about the battery die. Again, you do most of your dive without a battery, and by the time that you need a battery, you sort of need it. Because what will happen is you're breathing grams of air out. Let's say that you reach a point that you're saying, it would be nice to run the battery now, but it doesn't work. You know what? You take the battery out, it fell. You lost it. There's no battery. It fell from the unit. It's somewhere in the ocean. You're like, oh, it would be nice to have a pump cycle right now. But if I don't have it, I have 20, 30, 40 minutes of slowly, slowly, slowly breathing out gas until I will even feel a dramatic extension. And even then, it's as if at the end of the dive, if you usually take, say, 12 pounds of lead, in this dive it took 10. That's what it feels like towards the end of the dive. So battery not functioning has no consequence on your buoyancy. And then the last thing that people ask all the time is what happens if the bladder is compromised? There's a hole in the bladder. So we've done that through the development. We poked the bladder and sat there and compressed the tank and waited for the mushroom cloud, to engulf the building. There's nothing. It's a bladder. It sits against the wall of the tank. It's like a giant gasket. So it sews itself. Even if the bladder, and then we, put 2 holes and 7 holes and then cut little shapes in it to see if that will change anything. A bladder compromise has no consequence. You won't know throughout the dive. The air is in the bladder. What happens is a tiny bit of air go into the water that's inside the tank. It pressurizes that. But liquids have a very slow, there's a very limited amount of gas that they can contain. And so that stops, and then you just have air. It's not like an O-ring. The perception is it's going to be like an O-ring that bursts and now air leaks out. It's not like that because it's contained. You're inside the tank. And so do you have positive pressure in the bladder? Water water is not a medium that expands, only air is. So it pushes any chance of water coming in out constantly, and you just finish your dive. Again, you won't know. You get out, you wash the tank. When you wash the tank, you actually put the whole system in water. And then when you purge it, you might see a little bit of air coming out from the purge. You take it to the technician, they replace the bladder. Those are the three things that are, you know, you'll see in the training that one of the things that we're like, okay, you had a malfunction, it's not an emergency. You had a malfunction, it's not an emergency. And then we make you do it.
It sounds a lovely system indeed, and it's one I look forward to learning more about. You're not in the UK at the moment. You mentioned you might make a presence here at the end of this year or next year.
There are several dive shops that have approached us. We were not ready to go to Europe. Our focus was US, Caribbean, um, Latin America, and obviously Hawaii and the Far East. We did win the Boat Show Award, Technology Award, but our plan was to get into Europe next year. But we got a lot of requests, and apparently the answer that just come to the, you know, just come to Indonesia or the Philippines and dive it. Apparently that's not good enough. So we're working with several. We the hydro tank itself is CE marked. I know that in the UK that's doesn't matter because you have your own. Um, but obviously that will help. And then we're waiting to get CE for the jetpack itself because it's not a device that was known to the authority. That's the only reason.
Fabulous. Yeah, it's been amazing to hear about the system. Especially, as you get older and older, as you diving, all those weights and it's just becomes a bit of a drag in the end. This
Yeah.
sounds a fantastic solution. It really does. And I assume also for younger new divers, who get slightly put off by all the weight and things they have to carry. So in many ways, it's very attractive.
Yes, it's a bit for either generation or even the professional or recreational ability. The real difference is, and it's hard to explain until you're in the water with it, because unlike most other scuba gear that has a bit of an improvement, this changes your life as a diver. You go in and everybody is the same because we get that it's like 100% response. We get people who are, as you said, if they're thinking about the weight as the advantage, it's nice. Absolutely, it's nice, especially if you do a lot of shore dives. It's nice to cut down weight. And then you get in the water. And then one by one, people come out. And we're talking, as I said, recreational divers to industry gurus. Everybody comes out of the water. I'm like, oh, not sure. I'm not sure what happened here, but something happened here. I know you speak physics. I understand this, but this is a different experience.
Lovely. Sounds perfect. Well, look, thank you very much for taking time to show it to us. Look forward immensely to it arriving in the UK somewhere, wherever it may be. But for now, I'll say thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.